Commission's information, item number 7 is basically so we can comply with the sunshine law. We don't have specific written proposals to amend the rule, but in order to allow the commission to discuss possible amendment to Rule 12, that is why we have this on the agenda, just so that we can comply with the sunshine law if it is the desire of the commission. What we're really here to do more is the administrative matters, which is the letters from Mr. Yvonne and from Mr. Voss regarding the geothermal.
Thank you, Madam Director. So staff, is there a staff presentation?
Just briefly, again, there are 2 communications from the planning department that I would like to draw your attention to, and it was previously distributed to you. First of all is a letter dated October 3, 2012, from the director to the commission. It basically provided background information regarding GRP number 2, as well as some points of observation regarding both letters from former council members Yagong and Blas. In a nutshell, as the director mentioned, their request is basically asking what is the procedure in which a proposed health study can be funded by the Geothermal Asset Fund. There was also a second letter that was provided to the commission dated November 7, 2012, in which the planning director offered her analysis regarding the possible funding of a health study by the Geothermal Asset Fund. So basically what you have before you is the request as well as some background information and the director's analysis and recommendation. In a nutshell, we believe that the Geothermal Asset Fund can fund a health study, but it may need some adjustments or modification to your rules in order to accomplish that more effectively. But in order to accomplish that, we probably need some direction from the commission on how you would like it to be accomplished. So basically, we need a directive from the commission. So I stand ready to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Not right now. Any questions for Darren? Okay, is it getting hot in here, or is it just me?
It's the pressure.
It's the geothermal.
You know what? I think they turned it off at 4:30. Okay.
So the chair, I'm gonna have to excuse myself from this topic.
Thank you. Just get our stuff together as Ms. Commissioner Ishibashi takes a seat with the public. Okay, we have 4 people signed up to testify. Why don't you guys all just come up? Carrie Marks, Robert Petrucci, and Travis. So what we'll do is we're taking testimony on agenda number 7 as well as administrative matters. Is that correct? Mr. Rai, is that correct? We're taking testimony on behalf of number 7 as well as administrative matters? Or do we need to take testimony out of?
Well, I guess you could speak on both, but there is no specific proposal to amend Rule 12 at this time. But I guess it could, if you have any specific comments or suggestions on any amendments to Rule 12.
And we have a large Travis.
Actually, I'm going to donate the time to Carrie or
can you two please raise your right hand? Do you affirm this and swear to tell the truth in front of the Board of Planning Commission today?
You do?
Thank you very much. Why don't we start off with Carrie Marks?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carrie Marks. I live in Calmon City, and I'm donating my time to Robert Patrici.
Okay, Mr. Juicy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I gave you written testimony, and this is the amendments to geothermal asset fund rules as submitted by the planning director on November 7th, 2012. The GRP2 requires PGV to contribute to a geothermal asset fund or other appropriate existing fund for the purpose of geothermal impact mitigation efforts within the District of Puna. Further says a priority list of impact mitigation projects may be established by the county council or agency designated by the council in conjunction with Puna residents or designated representatives. Puna Pono Alliance delivered a proposal by Dr. Kay Kilborn to a health study to the county council. The council chair forwarded Dr. Kilborn's proposal to the commission. Subsequently, American Noise Research and Development Office contracted with Dr. Peter Adler, saying in the context of promoting clean, affordable, renewable energy, the county desires to conduct a scientifically thorough, culturally appropriate, and objective fact-finding study of the potential community health impacts from geothermal energy production in the Puna district. Dr. Adler prepared a scope of work exhibit to the contract that says the group will list public health questions about Puna geothermal effects, inventory existing studies on the subject, and develop recommendations about the priorities and preferred methodologies for future scientific and monitoring studies. The director's November 7, 2012 letter notes the commission has adopted Rule 12 in relation to the geothermal asset fund, and Rule 12 is geared towards the making of individual claims for compensation based on adverse impact, including claims for temporary relocation. Funding a health impact study is not expressly covered by Rule 12, and the procedures outlined in Rule 12 relate to the handling of claims for compensation. Suggestion for a comprehensive health study is not yet a subject which is addressed by Rule 12. The director's letter proposed amending Rule 12 in keeping with Condition 49 to allow impact mitigation projects to be funded by the Geothermal Asset Fund and set up the process for the council or designated agency to set up a priority list of such projects. Director says the amendment should give the commission authority to address the health studies methodology, to hire a consultant to make a model for the study and criteria for the expertise of an investigator, to have the planning department solicit bids, select qualified individuals to conduct the study, and to authorize the commission to review the draft health study and require supplementation of the study's content and methodology. That proposal is not acceptable for several reasons. First, there's an obvious overlap of purposes between the county's contract with Dr. Adler and the proposed new rules. Second, the recommendations exceed the authority allowed by the Planning Commission by the county code. The administers payments from the asset fund. The recommendations made by the director purport to authorize the commission to take a hand in the details of conducting and reporting the results of a health study. No law gives that right to the commission. Without legal authority, and especially without scientific competence, it should not be attempted. With all due respect, the recommendation plainly exceeds the reasonable competence of this commission. In the county's $50,000 contract with Dr. Adler, there's a plan to recommend priorities and preferred methodologies for a community health study. Dr. Adler's website says his contract on the health risks associated with geothermal energy production will result in 1, a list of public health questions pertinent to the issue, 2, a reliable inventory of existing studies pertinent to the issue, and 3, recommendations about the priorities and preferred methodologies of future scientific and monitoring studies that may be required. The director's proposal for the commission to address methodology and hire a consultant to develop a model for the study directly overlaps the results required by Adler's existing contract. Third, it appears the Geothermal Asset Fund rules, in fact, have been applied to claims for relocation that were paid from the Geothermal Relocation and Community Benefits Fund, but have not been applied to the Geothermal Asset Fund. Hawaii County Charter 10-12 provides for the establishment of special funds and there are 2 such geothermal styled funds. County Code Chapter 2, Article 35 creates the Geothermal Asset Fund from PGV payments required by GRP 2. Code Chapter 2, Article 36, creates the Geothermal Relocation and Community Benefits Fund and from geothermal royalties received by the county. Code 2-182 authorizes the planning director to make rules for the administrating relocation claims from the Article 36 royalty fund, but it seems no such rules were made. Instead, Rule 12, relating to the Geothermal Asset Fund defined in Article 35, appears to have been used for claims for relocation paid by Article 36 fund. Thus, the planning department precedent, if Rule 12 is being applied to Article 36 claims, the Article 35 Geothermal Asset Fund is left without rules. With Rule 12 applying to Article 36 relocation claims, amending Rule 12 cannot address issues in regard to the Article 35 Geothermal Asset Fund. In sum, we object to the proposal of the planning director for new rules purporting to regulate both the fund and conduct of house studies. We object to ignoring how rules for the Geothermal Asset Fund appear to have been applied to Article 36 relocation claims, and we object to duplicating the existing Adler proceeding that is working towards ends similar to those proposed by the planning director. It would be, for lack of a better word, abusive of the Planning Commission's legitimate role for it to upsert the field of science by arrogating to itself decisions on the expertise, methods, criteria, and final content of the health study. We believe this could result in an attempt to control the health study by censorship so as to obtain politically desired results. As an appropriate initial remedial step, the Planning Commission should request an audit of the two special funds existing under Article 35 and 36. An audit can determine the nature of disbursements under both funds, especially in terms of how claims are processed. The audit may give the Commission a basis for setting its house in order after the apparent confusion. We have a widespread history of conflict between the community and the county on this. And it was interesting that Mr. Ishibashi brought up in the last thing about community input into projects. And from a community standpoint, geothermal projects in our community, we don't feel that we've had a voice. We don't feel that we've had that kind of input. And after 31 years, I've been doing this for 31 years, we don't feel we've gotten a house study that's acceptable to the community, and that's all we're really trying to do here, is get a health study that everybody can agree to, and I hope we can get the rules to do that. The county gave Peter Adler $50,000 to study this study. After 31 years, we think that's, I should have had long enough to look at this issue. We should have gotten to this. We asked for $200,000 to do the study. We've already spent 25% of that now to study the study. And so I hope we can just get the health study, a real health study. There's obviously people on both sides of this issue. Some people think there are impacts. Some people say there are no impacts. We need to settle it one way or the other. Thank you.
Madam Director?
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, which may not be apparent from Mr. Patrici's testimony. The rules under which the Article 36 relocation and community benefits have been done are the planning department rules. Rule 12 that we're discussing is the planning commission rule, which applies to the asset fund. There's two separate sets of rules. One is the planning department's rules, which apply to the royalty fund.
That's Planning Department Rule 36?
No, there's, trying to remember the exact rule number, but, I can grab it for you. Because we were directed to create rules for the royalty fund, and we did as a department. The director does not make the rules for the planning commission. You have a public hearing, you do rules for, the department. So we have department rules that cover the use of the royalty fund. The rules that the planning commission has controls the use of the asset fund. So there's two different sets of rules. I think it's 10, but I wasn't 100%. So it's planning department rule 10 that you may want to go and take a look at, which is our geothermal relocation program.
Planning Department Rule 10, you said?
Yeah.
And that applies to royalty fund and the
Yeah.
12 is the commission rule for the
The
asset.
asset fund, yeah. And I think that's the confusion because we have commission rules, we have
Is there any
department
kind of
rules.
form or paper we could get to understand that better, so when we come back? Okay.
Microphone.
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 Oh, sorry. Is there, any kind of written, rules or some way that we could get that in writing, like?
Well, number one, I believe is on our website, the planning department rules, and you just go to Rule 10, and it's in writing, and that's the rules that we operate under. We also have a form that people typically use in order to apply for relocation. The other ways the fund gets utilized are basically through the county council's budgeting process or their resolutions. And that's a separate process because that's through the county budget, I think. But that is when we were doing the community benefits
Right.
projects, they would actually put that into the budget. So if they put it in the budget, then it was already approved by the council.
And that's why we went to the council first and asked for the money from the council, and then we were told that, oh, well, there's another mechanism in place to do that, which is the asset fund, and that was the proper place to go, but then we went to that's where we let us here, we
Well,
haven't really.
the other reason is that I have 22 requests which exceed the entire amount of money in the royalty fund.
I understand.
So if that's a priority, then there isn't any money.
Yeah, I see, I
That's
see.
another reason why we started looking at the asset fund, which is sitting there, 2 million, not being utilized, but clearly was intended under condition 49 to do mitigation
I understand.
projects.
I would like to make a point of clarification, when we made the request for the 50,000, for the study, that we didn't have all those claims, the majority of those claims came in after we made the request for the funds.
Problem is that both the department rules as well as the county code make relocation of people a priority expenditure, and so it became.
No, I hear you. My point really was this, that when we made the request for the funds to the county council, you didn't have those claims to be a priority, but we were told, no, you have to go to the asset fund. I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear about that.
Any questions for the testifier? Now we'll go on to Tom Travis. Please state your name and where you reside, and you may.
I'm Tom Travis. Is the mic working?
Yes, it's on.
I'm Tom Travis. I reside in Lower Kuna. I have the following concerns with the proposed procedures and rules for using geothermal asset funds for community health studies. First, the proposed rules give the Planning Department Commission influence in shaping health studies and in deciding how to report out the health study. The Planning Department has neither the expertise nor the experience to assume these responsibilities. Second, Dr. Adler is currently heading a working group to identify what health studies are needed and in what priority. It makes sense to await results of that study before setting procedures for study conduct. Third, the general resource permit requires these funds to be used for the community, yet I see no safeguards to ensure funds go to the community from which these funds are generated, nor do the rules strictly safeguard the community's role, ensuring participation of the community, but not providing accountability to the community. Without involvement of the county council, I see no other remedy for guaranteeing the community's role. Finally, use and administration of the two funds is jumbled, difficult to sort out, and in my limited ability, difficult to comprehend. To mitigate this problem, I would recommend an audit of the two funds, what expenditures there have been from each, and what rule sets have been in place for each expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the testifier? So how we're gonna take this, these are non-voting, right? We just open for discussion.
Right, at this point, as the director said, there's no specific rule proposal to discuss. However, there are those two requests from the former council people just asking for some direction. And it kind of sounds like, for the testifiers, and maybe we should hear from the planning director what she thinks about waiting for Mr. Adler's study to be completed as well. It seems to be something that the testifiers are suggesting.
Yes, I'd like to hear that, and I'd like to see where Adler's at. Where exactly he's at. I mean, you guys must have some kind of report from him, right? Maybe Mr. Merrills can come up and do that. Can you come up, Mr. Merrills? Okay, please. So the rest of you may be seated. Thank you very much for your time. Mr. Merrills, I need to swear you in. Raise your hand. Do you affirm and swear to tell the truth in front of the planning commission today?
I do.
Thank you. Can you state your name, where you reside?
My name is Jeff Melrose. I reside in Hilo, and I currently am a project development specialist in the mayor's office, and as the point of contact for Mr. Adler's study. So, really, I don't know how to address the legal questions, and I'll let the planning director deal with the sequence of this, but I'll give you just an update. The administration believes that this is an important issue, that the development of a health study is an important outcome, and it's an important part of resolving and clarifying public policy going forward as it relates to geothermal. Getting a good public study, getting a study done that is done in the best possible way with the least amount of kind of political or political science engagement in the process is an important outcome to make a good decision. So the administration found a small amount of funds in the Department of Research and Development to fund what is called a joint fact-finding process. Science and public policy often pass each other in the night, and this is partly an effort to bring some clarity about what science would be appropriate, what the current issues are, what kind of priorities there are to study what. You have a limited amount of money, $2 million actually in a science study context is relatively small. How would you do that? How would you come up with the right kind of study using the right kind of information? So Mr. Adler's an internationally known complex problem solver, and he was contracted. We are at arm's length, but really he makes his own decisions. He has selected a joint fact-finding study group. Includes, I think at this point, about 12 or 13 people. It will grow. We have no impact on who those are. I believe Mr. Travis and Mr. Patrizio are on that group. Its first meeting is Saturday morning. It's primarily organizational by nature, and it will have a presentation both by a gas specialist from HBO and from PGV in terms of specific questions about operations and chemicals involved in that operation. The group includes a cross-section of epidemiologists, public health specialists, people who have been active in the community in a variety of perspectives. And I think, this is an important effort to try and get to the bottom of the matter. I'm very pleased that Mr. Patrizzi and Mr. Travis are willing to sit in this conversation, and as with all of the other members of it. So I expect that process will probably take, depending on how the conversation proceeds, into April probably before a final report is due. It's due to you with a set of recommendations that will help improve your capacity to understand the challenge of use of those monies, since those monies are, I believe, in the responsibility of the commission to approve. So it'll set a context, and we'll try to provide some guidance about what this group arrives at in terms of sequence of science. Maybe the part of the issue the group arrives at really ought to do monitoring. We need to do, and who knows what they're going to come up with, but the point is that the sequence is something that they will come up with as a body of recommendations for you. So that helps to build your capacity to make better decisions in this process and to give the county planning department some clarity about what amounts to significant science, what's gone on other places in the world, what's gone on in New Zealand and other places around the world, so that we don't just jump in at whatever point something pushes us. We actually use that body of science and construction. So this is a tool to be useful to your deliberations. Any questions? Really a serious application to get clarity and to do the study that I think is asking.
Thank you very much. Any questions? to see that we're moving along, even though we didn't hear you guys for 4 months. Even with that, you guys are still going along, and I'm glad to see that both of you guys are involved in the process.
Thank you for staying late to do it today. I appreciate it.
We all have to do our part in serving our community, so thank you guys. Okay, any more administrative matters? We skip minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Madam Director, could we get a report on where we go from here and what are we doing?
The biggest concern we had when we reviewed Route 12 is that it didn't seem to fully implement Condition 49. And Condition 49, was clearly intended that you could do mitigation projects. And I consider something like funding health fund, a health study, a mitigation project, because you can't really mitigate unless you know what is or is it not the impact, because you have to know what the impact is in order to do mitigation. So I felt that was a reasonable use and implementation of Condition 49. The problem is that Rule 12, as written, only addresses claims for direct impact and says that those claims go through a claims adjuster. So I thought that the rule probably needs to be tweaked to follow Condition 49 more, and also to create a process by which you would fund something like a health study as opposed to sending it to a claims adjuster. And so, I'm just saying, I think there needs to be something tweaked. I need some direction from the commission if you want me to go and draft something along those lines, which would then come back. You would take a look at that draft. If you were interested in amending the rule, then we would have to conduct a public hearing on amending the rule, at which point people could comment on whether the rule satisfied what they thought it needed to have, whether it addressed the concerns, whether it was implementing 49. And you have that authority because you have that authority under your approval of the Geothermal Resources Permit and under your condition which set up the $50,000 per year. Because you folks did that. The reason the fund is specifically created in the county code is under the charter you have to, for accounting purposes, you have to set up a special fund so that the finance department can segregate the money and account for it separately. And then the council said, go and make rules up to administer the fund. But you already have a lot of that authority under the Geothermal Resources Permit authority that you had when you issued it. The disconnect I had in all of this is that we had $50,000 coming in. Because it was only set up for like the direct claims and because of the process, and people could not prove that what they believed was a detrimental impact. They could not provide proof that in fact this was because of PGV. You couldn't come in with a doctor's report saying, I'm suffering from this because of PGV, because there wasn't the basis. So what happened is nobody, virtually nobody was applying for any of the asset fund money. And which is why at the rate of $50,000 a year, we're at $2.1 million. And the last time we expended any money, I think, was the commission approved back in the maybe 2007. I'm not sure there was a Mr. Nowset that put in a claim that he did relocation, and as a result of the relocation, he had lost revenues from the crops that he would have had on his property, and so he was given some asset fund money to mitigate the lost revenue from his orchard. But it's been very small amounts, and in fact, almost all of the relocation has been done under the royalty fund, and that's because there's no requirement under the royalty fund that you show you have been impacted by geothermal. All you need to do is express a desire to be relocated. And then we have a department rule on that, and we set up a preference that it had to be a pre-1989 structure or permit, and that there was a preference for those that were located within 1 mile of PGB. But you don't have to provide any proof that you've actually been detrimentally impacted by PGB, just a desire to be relocated. So it's much easier to go under that fund, and it was designed to make it easier for people to use that money when the rules were done, because they have no proof requirement. Whereas the asset fund has a proof requirement, which is why you have nobody asking, or virtually anyone asking for relocation under the asset fund.
Okay, so under the asset fund, we have $2 million.
The last time we looked at it, we have approximately $2.1 million, and the fund grows at the rate of $50,000 per year, because that's the requirement that PGD has to pay into it.
And then where are we at the royalty? We also oversee that fund?
Not really. The royalty fund is administered under the department's rules. That is the money that comes in from, because the state considers geothermal heat a part of their mineral rights, under the lease agreements for harnessing the mineral rights, PGB has to pay a percentage of their profits to the state of Hawaii. The state then gives us a percentage of that money. And basically, the way it works is we get 20% of the funds go to OHA, really 30% of the funds come to the county of Hawaii, which we put into the royalty fund, and the remaining 50% stays with the state of Hawaii. OHA is able to spend their money however they want to. We have specific restrictions that the royalty fund has to be spent in specific, originally it was just relocation, and so under our department rules it was primarily the 1989 and the 1 mile radius. Subsequently, the county council amended it, and part of that was that there was a significant period of time where there were no claims being made against the royalty fund for relocation. So the fund was growing because we were getting from a low of maybe $100,000 to a high of $700,000 in a year was coming in under royalties. So the county council amended it to create a community benefits fund, so that some of the money could be spent for community benefits. And under that amendment, the council could decide how that money would get spent, and they would appropriate it in the budget. So prior expenditures have been, they use some of the money to combine, I think, with fuel tax money so they could pave or repave Opihikau Road. Some of that money got used to repave Pahoa Road, right into Pahoa Village Road. About $700,000 went to expand the new transfer station in Pahoa, because they had enough money through CIP to do, I think, 2 chutes. The $700,000 allowed them to do 3 chutes. So, and then some of the money has been spent for the council offices in Pahoa. Some of the money has been spent in Parks and Recreation accounts, and all of this has been through direction of the county council as to how those monies will be spent. The department doesn't decide how the money gets spent; it comes through the county council. And recently, we've had a number of claims made that. The last time we looked at it, it adds up to approximately $4.5 million in claims for relocation. The funding at the beginning of this fiscal year was about 2.1, so the request for relocation exceeded the amount of money, and also, frankly, kind of overwhelmed the department in terms of just the sheer number, because from the time the fund was originally set up through this year, I think we'd only dealt with by maybe a total of 5 5 or 6 relocation requests, and the last one I think was, that had been processed was probably Mr. Malasek, which was, I'm trying to remember, it was 2004, 2005, somewhere in there, I can't remember the exact date. But it had been a while before anybody had actually, and so suddenly, partially because of publicity, we suddenly had a whole slew. And I think the drilling exacerbated it, because people were feeling overwhelmed by the amount of noise being generated.
So do you know the dollar amount that we're at? I know it doesn't pertain to us, but I'm just curious.
The last time I saw, we had 2.1.
Over
Both
royalty.
2.1 in the asset and 2.1 in the royalty. We should have additional revenues coming in, but we frequently see a time lag between the time the state receives the royalty money and they cut us a check. And, but we were anticipating that going forward, particularly because PGV is back up from, they had for a period of time, some of their production had been down and their production is back up. We anticipate that we would probably receive in the neighborhood of between 500 to 700,000, and we're hoping that it's closer to the $700,000 per year. That would be additional revenues.
Thank you for the information, Madam Director.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just want to draw your attention again to our Director's October 3, 2012 letter. I just wanted to make sure you're aware that she does set forth a recommendation to the Commission for its consideration. So that's why we come to that recommendation.
Okay, yeah, so on behalf of the commission, I'd like to give direction to Madam Director to draft something to amend Route 12 to implement additional rate. If the commission is okay with that, that's what I was recommending to you.
So, yeah, I mean, if the commission is in unanimous consent with that, that's okay. I don't know if you want to make any connection between that and the timing of the Adler study or not.
Of course, with the result of the Adler study, the draft is going to go along the lines of that. Okay. And what's the time frame? What are we anticipating for the Adler study?
If you want me to wait for the Adler study's recommendations to come in, we can. And based on the recommendations, draft the rule in a fashion that would allow us to fund the types of studies that the Adler recommendations make. We're just trying to make sure that it's consistent with procurement code and that there's a process.
I think that would be appropriate to wait for the Adler studies and then draft them. If everybody's in favor of that.
The only thing is, we do not know how long that's gonna take, correct? Is that correct? We don't know how long
Mr.
that
Rose,
other
can
study.
you maybe if you can just give us a anticipated, the first meeting is this Saturday, and I believe they're both involved in it.
Yeah, I would believe that essentially the process will move along crisply, hoping by, early April you'll get a study. I think the question is really moving into the next phase of a study, of actually implementing a study. If you wait until after that study is to begin to even consider the draft rules and go through a public hearing process and that, you won't have the rules to be able to implement it until some period after April. And, I think there's perhaps a sense of urgency in the community to want to move this thing forward. So I think generically, the specifics of the study will give you some content issues, but what you need is the structural clarity in the rule itself, so that public health studies can be enabled and you get away from this, what was it called, adjuster, claims adjuster. And, you set the system that allows that to happen. And so I don't think the details of the study necessarily need to be in the rules. So, but if you wait to make them sequential, it'll be a longer time before the studies are initiated. The studies themselves take a fair amount of time. So it just,
I never anticipated delineating the methodology of a study or the content of a study. I was more concerned about methodology of awarding money for a study, whether you have to do is it an RFP? Is it straight procurement? Is it sole source? And those were the kinds of issues that I was more concerned about, but also getting away from the idea that a claims adjuster makes the decision on whether something gets funded or not. Because I didn't think that that was the appropriate.
Yes, please.
As far as the procurement process, you're gonna be really limited. There's a limited pool of people that can actually do these kind of studies on hydrosol. There's very few people that are the top experts in the world. This is what we need. So I just take that into consideration. Like if you just put a contract out to bid, I don't think that's gonna work very well.
I think what we're going to probably do is say that you develop either, that you have to do it either through an RFP, through a sole source, or if there's only sole source, but some mechanism in the rule that allows us to procure and has to be consistent with the procurement code. And that's all that I'm looking for, because my concern was that the way it's currently drafted, everything goes through claims adjuster. And I talked to representatives from insurance industry and stuff like that, and they say, hey, a claims adjuster can tell you how much damage you had to that building or that car, but they're not the person who should tell you whether this study versus that study should get funded. That's my concern with the rule. It's not trying to design or have the department say, this is what the study's gonna look like, so much as setting up the process by which you would fund the study.
and I would just add that I just don't think it needs to be done sequentially. I think that exactly what the director is saying is, create or fix the structure so the solution can evolve appropriately, and the details of the study aren't in the rules. They'll be in the advice that comes from the study.
Yeah, I agree with our testifiers and our Madam Director. It's not time of an essence, but it's something that doesn't have to go hand in hand, and it's two different things, two different issues, the procurement as opposed to the health study.
And I might note that Mr. Patrici and his friends can comment on the rule. What I'm proposing is to come in with like a draft rule before we actually go out for public hearing to adopt, so that there can be comment from the public, whether the rule addresses your concerns, whether it's going the wrong direction, and then we can tweak. And then when the commission, if we've got something the commission likes, then we set it up for a public hearing with a public notice, because we gotta publish it, and show people what we are, and then have people come in.
So it would be just a draft, and it would come in front of the commission, and it would be open public testimony. And so I think it would be safe to just go ahead and give direction to the planning department and the Madam Director to go ahead. Mr. Chavez?
Just one quick comment, if we could figure out some way to involve the community in deciding what the health study is, either being a member of who determines the contract is awarded to or not, or having some accountable input through elected officials, I think that would also be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, well, that would definitely be something that if Madam Director drafts it, or if I believe the commissioner can put it in as a condition. It's not necessary. Or would it have to be in Madam Director's draft?
It would probably have to be incorporated within the draft rules. If you want that component to be explicitly clear. But that's something, again, they can make that recommendation once the draft rules are prepared, and the commission will consider to incorporate it or not.
Okay, well, we've got time. As far as the first initial notice in the draft.
Just one little note on the history. There's been several studies attempted, and one was done by the Department of Health, and I'm sure the plan director is aware of this. So one was done by the Department of Health. Community didn't think it was done in a way that was acceptable to the community. Another was done by University of Texas that the developer was, so it's, that's our problem. We need something that's gonna be, acceptable by everybody, so we don't just spin our wheels.
Thank you very much. Moving on to administrative matters.
Chair, let me just give you a real brief update on some matters that are before the county council that has also gone before you. There was a recent change of zone, Jinjin Ling. There was a rezoning along